Part 1: The Hook. At exactly 5:47 on a Friday afternoon, as the biting Oregon chill began to seep through the ancient pine trees, the ground at the Willow Creek station began to tremble. Silas Thorne stood inside the observation booth, his eyes fixed on a small, motionless silhouette sitting inches from the dangerous yellow line on platform 2. It was Jasper, a tuxedo cat with fur as black as coal and forepaws as white as fresh snow. He sat there, just centimeters from the tracks where a 100-ton express train was about to roar past at lethal speeds. The thunderous roar of the engine grew deafening, and the blinding high beams of the locomotive sliced through the thick evening fog. Most creatures would have bolted in terror, but Jasper didn't flinch. Instead, he stood tall, his amber eyes tracking every blur of steel and glass as the train screamed past the platform. As the final carriage vanished into the darkness, leaving a vacuum of wind that ruffled the white fur on his neck, Jasper leaned down to pick up a small object that had just tumbled onto the cold stone floor. Silas held his breath as the cat turned around. It was then he noticed the detail that made his heart skip a beat. A small white slip of paper was tied to the cat's tail with a thin crimson ribbon. The cat didn't head toward the warmth of the town. Instead, he turned toward a jagged, unlit trail leading into the dense forest of Miller Hill, a place of shadows and old legends. Why would a stray cat risk his life every week for a train that never stops? What was written on that paper? And who was sending it from a blur of steel? Silas knew if he didn't follow Jasper now, the truth would be buried by the mountain snow forever. Part 2: The Lonely Station Master. Silas Thorne was not a man of mysteries. At 61, he had spent 30 years listening to the rhythmic clanking of tracks and the dry monotone of arrival schedules. Willow Creek was a ghost of a station, a forgotten stop surrounded by towering pines and persistent mist. After his wife passed away 9 years ago, Silas had retreated into a life of quiet routine, living in a small apartment above the ticket office. He was a man of calloused hands and weary eyes, a spectator to a world that was always moving somewhere else. Jasper had entered his life 4 months ago during a brutal February snowstorm. The cat had crawled onto the station porch, his body skeletal and his breath shallow. Silas, who claimed he had no room for pets, had silently provided a bowl of warm milk and an old wool blanket. Jasper recovered, but he never acted like a house cat. He never meowed for food or sought out affection. He remained a silent, dignified shadow. The only mark on him was a small notch in his left ear, a souvenir from a hard life in the wild. Silas named him Jasper because his eyes sparkled like the gemstones found in the nearby riverbeds. He felt a kinship with the cat. They were both broken things trying to survive in a place where time stood still. But Silas had no idea that this quiet animal was carrying a burden heavier than any freight train passing through the valley. Part 3: The Friday Ritual. The pattern repeated every Friday at exactly 5:48 p.m. Silas noticed that regardless of the weather, whether it was a scorching heat wave or a torrential downpour, Jasper appeared at the exact same spot on platform 2. Initially, Silas thought someone on the train was throwing scraps of food. He tried to tempt Jasper with the finest tuna before the train arrived, hoping to keep him safe inside. But the cat refused every bribe. He would leave his meal half-eaten and step into the cold as soon as the distant whistle echoed through the canyon. By the second week, Silas realized Jasper wasn't just watching. As the express train barreled through, the cat seemed to be searching for a specific window. He would sprint along the platform, maintaining an incredible speed to keep pace with the blurred lights of the carriages for a few fleeting seconds. Once the train was gone, Silas saw Jasper carrying small items into the woods, a wildflower or a single biscuit wrapped in plastic. By the third week, the mystery deepened. Silas used his binoculars to watch from the second-story window. He saw a hand reach out from a window in the fifth carriage, the long-distance sleeper car. The person dropped a small bundle wrapped in red cloth. Jasper retrieved it with the precision of a soldier receiving orders. What chilled Silas was how practiced the move was. The cat never missed a beat. After checking the note on his tail, he would vanish into the Miller Hill Trail, a path that led only to the abandoned mining cabins of the upper ridge. Part 4: The Shadow of Doubt. Silas began to worry. He wondered if the cat was being used by criminals to transport illicit goods. Perhaps it was contraband or stolen jewelry. This remote station was the perfect dead drop for a mountain smuggling ring. The thought kept him awake at night. He didn't want Jasper, his only companion, to be caught in the crossfire of human greed. The following Friday, Silas decided to intervene. He closed the ticket office early and lured Jasper into the storage room, locking the door behind him. He believed that if Jasper missed 1 week, the sender on the train would give up. But he was wrong. Jasper's reaction was violent and heartbreaking. He didn't just scratch at the door. He threw his entire body against the wood, letting out agonizing, primal screams as if he were watching someone die. Unable to bear the cat's suffering, Silas opened the door. Jasper bolted like a lightning bolt. It was 5:50 p.m. The train had passed 2 minutes ago. The cat ran frantically across the empty platform, sniffing the air with wide, desperate eyes. He circled the tracks for 3 hours in the freezing rain, refusing to come inside. Silas stood there with an umbrella, watching the cat's despair, and realized this wasn't about smuggling. Jasper wasn't waiting for something of value. He was fulfilling a spiritual duty, a habit so deep that no physical barrier could break it. Part 5. The Cliffhanger. That night, Silas sat in the dark observation booth, reviewing the grainy footage from the old security camera he had secretly installed. He zoomed in on the moment the train passed. At 5:49, as Jasper frantically searched for the missed package, the station light hit the small paper slip still attached to his tail from the previous week. Under maximum magnification, Silas trembled as he read 3 handwritten words in red ink. For Evelyn. Wait. The name hit Silas like a physical blow. Evelyn Miller was the name of the elderly widow who lived in the secluded cabin on the hill. A woman everyone believed had moved away years ago after her husband, a track repairman, died in a horrific accident at this very station. Before we follow Silas into the woods to uncover the truth behind this note, if you enjoy mysteries about the incredible loyalty of animals, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps me keep these heartwarming stories alive. Part 6. The Trek into the Woods. Saturday morning, Silas didn't wait for the next train. He packed a high-powered flashlight and some supplies and began the climb up Miller Hill. Jasper led the way, occasionally stopping to look back at Silas as if urging him to move faster. The trail was steep, littered with jagged rocks and overgrown with thorny bushes. It took Silas nearly 2 hours to reach the summit. There, hidden behind ancient pines, was a small wooden cabin with a moss-covered roof. To Silas's surprise, the house wasn't abandoned. White smoke curled from the chimney, and red geraniums sat in the windows. Jasper ran to the front door and scratched 3 times. The door opened slowly, revealing a woman in a wheelchair. It was Evelyn Miller. She looked much older than Silas remembered, with hair as white as snow and eyes clouded by time. "Hello, Jasper. Are you back already?" she said in a thin, warm voice. She reached down, her trembling hands untying the slip of paper from the cat's tail, the one Silas had left there out of guilt. Silas watched from behind a tree as she read the old note and smiled, her face lighting up for a brief moment. She gave Jasper a small piece of dried meat and whispered into his ear. Silas realized Jasper wasn't just a messenger. He was the only bridge between the world and this forgotten woman. But why did she believe the messages came from the express train? And who was really throwing them? Part 7. The First Truth. Silas stepped out from the shadows, startling Evelyn. After explaining who he was, she invited him inside. The cabin was surprisingly cozy, filled with the scent of cinnamon and pine. On the wall hung a portrait of a man in a railway uniform, Arthur, Evelyn's late husband. Evelyn told the story with tearful eyes. 15 years ago, Arthur often worked on remote stretches of track, sometimes away for a week at a time. Since Evelyn was paralyzed from a car accident, Arthur had trained Jasper, then a tiny kitten, to carry short messages from the station back home. Arthur would tie a note to Jasper's tail, and the cat would run over the hill to let her know he was safe. 3 years ago, Arthur died in a landslide while repairing Track 2 during a midnight storm. Jasper was the only one there. He had tried to dig through the mud until his claws bled. After Arthur died, Jasper vanished. Evelyn thought she had lost both her husband and her cat. But then, 4 months ago, Jasper suddenly returned, and miraculously, every Friday, he brought back a note, a flower, or a gift, just as Arthur had done years ago. "I know Arthur is gone," Evelyn whispered, "but Jasper gave me the faith that his spirit is still watching over me from those passing trains." Part 8. The Second Reveal. Silas knew Arthur was dead, and he knew spirits didn't send mail. He decided to conduct one final investigation. He contacted the regional rail dispatch to ask for the passenger manifest of the Friday Express. After many rejections, an old clerk helped him find a name. Julian Miller, the eldest son of Arthur and Evelyn, who everyone believed had died in a plane crash 6 years ago. The truth was a shock that left Silas in tears. Julian hadn't died. He had suffered a severe traumatic brain injury and amnesia in that crash. He had spent 5 years in a rehabilitation center under an anonymous name. 4 months ago, his memory began to flicker back. He remembered his father, his mother, and the tuxedo cat. Due to legal complications and debts from his accident, Julian couldn't return home immediately. He worked in the city, and every Friday, he took the earliest train passing through Willow Creek just to see his old station. One day, he saw Jasper standing on the platform. He threw his father's old handkerchief out the window. When he saw Jasper retrieve it and run toward the hill, Julian understood the cat still remembered his job. From then on, Julian prepared a note and money every week, throwing it to Jasper. He was afraid to stop the train because he didn't feel whole enough to face his mother yet. But Jasper knew. The cat recognized Julian's scent on the train. He understood the young master had returned, and he became the silent bridge to heal a mother's broken heart. Part 9. The Reunion. Knowing the truth, Silas faced a hard choice. Should he tell Evelyn her son was alive but hiding, or let her believe in Arthur's spirit? Looking at the lonely woman, Silas knew time was running out. The truth was the only medicine that could save her. The next Friday, Silas didn't stay in the booth. He stood on platform 2, right next to Jasper. When the 548 Express roared toward them, Silas didn't look at the cat. He looked at carriage 5. As Julian's arm reached out to drop the bundle, Silas used the station's loudspeaker and shouted with everything he had. "Julian, stop throwing! Get off at the next stop! Your mother is waiting!" The express train never stopped at Willow Creek, but Silas had used his authority to set an emergency track obstruction signal. The brakes shrieked, a sound that echoed for miles as the train ground to a halt. Jasper ran along the carriages, his tail held high like a flag. Julian Miller stepped down from the train, limping but crying. He looked at Silas, then at Jasper rubbing against his leg, and realized his secret was over. Silas pointed toward the Miller Hill Trail. "Go, before the fog hides the way home." Part 10. The New Normal. 3 months after the event that shook Willow Creek, spring had finally arrived. The station remained quiet, but the air felt different. Julian had officially moved back home. With Silas's help and a late insurance settlement, he repaired the cabin and started a small honey farm on the ridge. Jasper no longer had to run to the platform every Friday. His mission was complete. Now, he is usually seen sunbathing on the porch or lounging in the garden. His notched ear remained, but his coat was thick and shiny. He wasn't a stray anymore. He was the most honored member of the Miller family. As for Silas, he felt 10 years younger. Every weekend, he hiked up the hill to have tea with Julian and Evelyn. He realized that while his own wife couldn't return, helping others find their way back home had filled the void in his heart. Willow Creek was no longer a place of departures. It was the place where miracles began with a small note tied to a cat's tail. Part 11. The Final Reflection. One afternoon, as the express train passed by, Silas stood on the platform holding a bowl of milk for a new kitten Jasper had led in from the woods. He looked up at the hill and saw 3 figures. Evelyn in her chair, Julian beside her, and Jasper sitting proudly on his shoulder. They waved at the train together, not searching for a ghost, but welcoming a new day. Humans are often too complex, blinded by fear and shame, which keeps them apart even when they are only a train ride away. Jasper, with the pure instinct of a loyal heart, reminded Silas that true love is never separated by distance or death. It just needs someone patient enough to listen and a heart brave enough to never give up. It turns out, Jasper never misunderstood Julian's actions. He knew it wasn't Arthur. He knew Julian needed a reason to come back just as much as Evelyn needed a reason to stay. He played along with the old message game just to keep his family from falling into the abyss of despair. Jasper was a guardian in the shape of a tuxedo cat, a silent protector of the most sacred human bonds. Part 12. Closing message. Sometimes, the smallest creatures carry the greatest hearts. Jasper's loyalty wasn't just instinct. It was a promise that as long as he breathed, no one in his family would be left behind. Love doesn't always need grand vows. Sometimes it just needs the soft patter of paws on an old platform and a small piece of paper carrying hope. If Jasper's story touched your heart, please leave a comment about your own loyal pets. And don't forget to subscribe to hear more incredible stories of hope and survival. Thank you for watching.